Hey everyone, this is Tim from Slingshot. I'm over our senior leadership and experience divisions and have been talking to a lot of churches and leaders this past week as they come to terms with this new digital reality. And it's interesting now that the conversation is shifting into how long is this going to be and what do we need to be thinking about. And top of the list seems to be Easter. Easter is 3 weeks away, and we believe there's going to be a lot of meetings this week strategizing on how to leverage Easter online. And we know there's a lot of churches out there without a team, and we want to be a team for you today as we collaborate and just talk about the conversations we're having. We don't have the answers. We know how to ask a lot of questions, and I wanted to gather some great friends together today to have a short conversation to hopefully help you as you dig into these conversations this week. So I'm going to introduce who we've got on the call. Maybe wave, guys, as I introduce you so people know who you are. We've got Keith, who leads our communications lane. Keith has been educating the church in the digital space for the last several years and providing resources, especially in the last 10 days, to help churches get their minds around this new reality. We've got Ted Vaughan, who's a digital and brand strategist and founding partner of Historic Agency, which is a digital branding and marketing company. We've got Anthony Miller, who's pastor of communications at Saddleback Church in Orange County and around the world. We've got Phil Bowdle, a creative arts pastor at West Ridge Church in Atlanta and author of best-selling book Rethink Communications, which is definitely what we're doing right now, right? He also serves in our communications area at Slingshot Group. We've got Jill Gilly, who's Executive Project Director at Eastside Christian Church in Anaheim, formerly Experience and Programming Director there. She's also a coach with IC, works with a lot of churches too. So I'd love to start by just having, let's jump down to Anthony and just, Anthony, tell us about the conversations that you're having at Saddleback, particularly as it pertains to Easter. What's Rick talking about? What's your role in this? What's the team talking about? Can you give us a bit of insight into that?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. I already feel smarter hanging with this group right here. So this is awesome. This is great. Yeah, I think right now, first of all, every day we've been receiving new news, right? And news is changing. 1 minute we're doing a lockdown, next minute we're not on a lockdown, and then next minute we are on a lockdown. So we really have been doing a lot of responding to crisis and trying to pivot quickly and figure out how to best serve the church and serve the community. But I think we had a moment of clarity this week when we realized what's the most important thing like we need to do right now. And I think the most important thing is to position ourselves to spread hope and not fear, to bring clarity to the conversation, to really position the church as a place that regains people's confidence in the community, right? So that's why we really wanted to lean into how do we strengthen our fellowship, our community, using digital strategies, online communities? How do we strengthen our small groups? We're a church built on small groups. And so that was the most important thing. How do we strengthen that, keep them feeling spiritually connected in fellowship? And then how do we assess the needs of the community and best serve the community? And so we've been reaching out to city officials, schools, everybody that seems like they're feeling the pinch right now, especially a lot of people losing jobs, like opening our food pantry. It was important that we kept our food pantry open because there's been dozens of food pantries closing all throughout the county. So we kept ours open, and every day we've been serving basically hundreds of people. The last 3 days, I think we served over 2,003 people. I think is the number, the most recent number. And we're seeing people that are waitresses and workers that are now out of jobs because their job is closed down and they don't even know how to survive these next few days. So assessing the needs of our community. And then now we're finally able to pause and look ahead towards what's next. So that's where we're at right now.
Right. And what do those conversations look like, Anthony?
So every day we've been doing a Zoom call as an entire staff led by Pastor Rick. And that's been amazing. You got 450 people on a big giant Zoom call. In fact, we tried to sing a song of worship together yesterday, and it was kind of bad. but it was amazing at the same time. But no, so every day we connect as a church family, as a team, and talking about what's most important. So the most important thing for us right now as a church, number one, is communication. What are we communicating to our members? How are we communicating to our members? Bringing a clarity of our messaging so we don't have a lot of distraction going on, and making it very easy for our congregation to know what's going on day to day. So we actually started this newsletter, this email that goes out every single day. And we compile news that they can use about our church and about what's going on in the world. We compile articles of what's going on, and then we compile all these things that people can do at home, resources, activities, ministry, serving opportunities, because people are bored. They're literally bored out of their mind. Like, what can I do? And so we're giving them, here's some things you can do serving at home with your family. So for instance, we started this new, a couple things. We have care callers that are calling other members in our church proactively, just seeing how they're doing. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that right now, people's emotional needs are probably the biggest need of our church. People are just stressing out, trying to figure out what to do, trying to figure out how to respond and how to pick up the pieces, because a lot of people are out of work. So the emotional needs of our church is big. So now we're mobilizing those that are in position to help, to serve those that need help. So that's what we've been doing this week. We got our kids involved. We have our kids writing letters to our elderly and sending them or sending them via email or even in the mail, just to kind of, again, give our kids something to do to serve those that need. So it really is about mobilizing the healthy to help those that are either vulnerable or at risk or not healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting, Anthony. I think it highlights how quickly things change. We were talking earlier in the week and you were talking about small group strategy. And then, of course, now you're sheltering in place and you can't meet as small groups. Everything has changed. That's why I think we're on the front end of this Easter discussion, because we've been coming to grips with so many changing realities. What does that look like, Phil, for you guys at Westridge in Atlanta as you're thinking towards or moving out of that phase and thinking forward?
Yeah, I think first we're trying to think for our community, just asking similar questions to what Saddleback is asking. We're trying to ask everybody in our church, for our staff. First, for our staff, we're trying to hear for our staff to say, how are you doing? How can we pray for you? Because if we aren't caring for those who are caring for others, we're going to be in a mess. So we're starting there, and then we're just trying to mobilize our leaders and our leadership pipeline to be asking those questions. How are you doing? How can we pray for you? Because these are chances for us as a big church to make a big church feel small. As we think about Easter, the things that we're really trying to ask as a church and as a leadership team, and we do not have all the answers figured out, and I don't think we could feel like we do, and then tomorrow something will change and our parameters will be even tighter for what we can do or what we can accomplish. But I think the question that's on our heart right now is just, what does our community need from us right now? And that's not what kind of video can we shoot or how can we produce this? I think what we're trying to ask is, what does our community need? And the things that are on our heart right now, and I don't know if this scales for everybody, but we're just trying to focus on a couple of things. We're trying to focus on authenticity. We're just trying to make sure that what we say, we're trying to reflect an authentic feel for everything, for how we produce things, how we say things. As leaders, we just want to be authentic and real. We're trying to reflect a generous church right now in the midst of everybody being very fearful and everything being kind of opposite of generous right now. We're trying to reflect generosity. We have a really powerful story that we're looking to share here, most likely at Easter, that will reflect that. And just trying to step up as a church, as being a generous church right now. That's going to stand out in a time like this. And we're trying to be a voice of hope. Where fear is really loud, hope is a lot louder right now. So we're trying to be that. And as a communications team, as a creative arts team that I get to lead, our mission statement before and now has always been to just put Jesus on display. So with every social media post, with every service we do, with everything we're doing, our goal is just to put Jesus on display. So the parameters are changing. It's just funny. I was thinking back a couple of weeks ago, and first we were thinking, okay, hey, there might be some changes of, hey, we might have to miss 1 week. We might have to shut down 1 week and just do online. Then it's, hey, we might have to, just have a small group of gathering of people. And then it's, hey, no, now you can only have 10 people. And now it's, hey, you might have to only figure out a way to do a service and put together a service with nobody meeting together. And it's like, in some ways it's crazy, scary, fearful, but in some ways I am so excited because this is our time as creatives and leaders in the church. This is our chance because we are called for this. God doesn't need us. He chose us for this. So what a blessing that we have right now to lead in this time and leverage the greatest opportunities we've ever had to communicate the gospel in a time where people are more open than ever to receive it. So as far as how that scales to Easter, that may look different tomorrow than it does today, but our tone is really what we're focusing on right now, is focusing on those couple things.
Yeah, one of those things that jumped out to me right there, Phil, is focusing on stories. As programmers, we're always thinking about blowing it up creatively at Easter. I think right now we need to be thinking about how to tell those stories of what's happening in people's lives to keep us connected. Jill, you have an interesting mix of creative and also kind of executive leader, project manager. How's it playing out for you at Eastside?
Yeah, similar to what the guys are sharing, I would say we talked about yesterday with intentional churches is staying focused on the Great Commission. And that applies no matter what situation, whether things are going great for us or we're in a crisis like we are now, is to stay focused, because I think so many of us are going to get distracted and have gotten distracted and jumping to things, kind of diluting the effectiveness. So, we just like to stay on talking about the gathering. What does that look like? We call them 3 pistons: the gathering and relationships, and then surrendered lives, which would play into the reaching out to the community and serving the community. So I'd say that for sure. It applies to Easter too. What's Easter look like with the Great Commission? A lot of us are trying to figure out how to do the relational digitally. I know we're looking at the team right now is working on how to get our what we call next steps. That's our assimilation process. How do we get that online so we can get people connected and tied in without being on the campus? So that's definitely a tool that we're looking at, trying to figure out how to make that work. So I would say too, also, we're trying to stay familiar. That's one of the things we did right away on week 1 that was at least the way we approached it. I know every church is trying to figure that out for themselves, but we just felt like a strength for us is to stay familiar, see familiar people on the stage, the worship team. That's really the second most seen person to the lead teaching pastor. So again, with that, having Gene present as well, we've got Gene set up at home with a video system. So as things got tighter around here in California, he was able to keep going with the devotions, similar to what one of you guys have already shared. So morning devotions short and keeping things shorter. We definitely have edited down our weekend content as well, just knowing the attention span, which is another thing. We're also trying to figure out how to stay connected to people, but not overdo it. And I can tell you as a mom, I probably get 20 emails a day from the schools, from the teachers, and they're doing a great, we're waiting to, does the online matter or not? And now we have the official word from the schools that they do have to do online work, so that changes things. But, we got the junior high ministry and the kids ministry and the high school ministry. Everybody's reaching out. So we're trying to maybe bring that in a little bit and not bombard people, but also still be the church. So as that pertains to Easter, we, like I'm sure many of you have done, as soon as this all started up, we threw out all of our ministry plans that we had just released, 6 months worth of ministry plans, and we set those aside. And we said, okay, what do we got to do? And so we did 2 new message series, one that we're in now, and then one that's going to lead into Easter, and then we'll start a new message series after that. And so that's part of our Easter approach is, okay, what kind of topic and series can we do that will draw people and keep them there through Easter? We normally don't do a Good Friday service. We have had to have Fridays as another opportunity for our Easter services to help care of the crowds. But now we're looking at what can we do online for a Good Friday experience, thus leading into an Easter experience. And like Phil said, we don't know exactly what that Easter experience is going to look like. We'll apply the things we've been learning, keep the time on the shorter side, familiar, of course, give people hope, and share the Easter, our belief in Easter and that Jesus rose. We'll share that in a way that hopefully works really well online. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, that's good. It seems people are all over the map. I was coaching a leader yesterday who they're filming all of their Holy Week offerings this coming week, and there are many other churches I've been talking to that haven't even begun the conversation. That's why it's good to talk this way. Keith, you have written 2 white papers this past week, 1.0 and 2.0. How's it go? Anyway, the second one was responding to the newer reality. What is it for you today? It's Saturday morning. We're recording this. What is it for you today? What should churches be thinking about as they start to think about this Easter conversation?
Yeah, even listening to this conversation and the great leaders that are around this virtual table right now, I'm reminded that the challenges we have in front of us are numerous. Challenges that we didn't even know existed. We couldn't have written them. I saw a post this morning on a group page of church leaders, and he said, if you'd have told me 2 weeks ago that I'd be spending 10 hours a day, working and producing digital content, engaging people online, he said, I would have said no way. But it's also, in some ways, it's a dream come true, right? Like, it's this idea that God's called me and equipped me as a communications leader or as a creative to produce content. And now that's where I'm spending my time. And my church is more dependent on me and relying on me than ever before. And so while there are numerous challenges, I was also reminded that quote or that saying that necessity is the mother of invention. And this has shaken us in so many ways because we need things that we didn't even know we needed before. And so it's causing the church to move toward innovation. And this last Sunday was, everyone moved to digital service. Now everyone's thinking digital strategy because it seems as though this is going to last a while. And being in Southern California, I can tell you that the challenges have been numerous, not just from a work standpoint, but from a life. How do I go about my day? My kids are at home now, shelter in place. And so just all of that stuff has created all sorts of needs. And I've just been impressed, honestly, with the work of the local church, that even though leaders don't have all the answers, they're asking great questions right now, and they're leaning into one another. And I've seen walls come down between leaders, between churches, even in our own communities, between churches, but between churches and schools and government. And this is an opportunity like we've never had before in the midst of the pain to run to that, to be a part of the solution. And so I'm just seeing the church rise right now, and as hard and as difficult and as challenging as it is, don't want to whitewash any of the challenges that families are facing in this season, because they are very real. But church leaders are responding. And I think, again, as Anthony was sharing a few minutes ago, that idea of digital first responders, that we could be people empowered with the tools to share the hope of the gospel right now in the digital space and use technology to bring people close while they're isolated. The church is perfectly equipped to do the work that needs done in our society right now. And so I'm just seeing that. I'm seeing leaders embrace that and run toward it, and really thankful for this conversation today, because it's the cross-pollination of ideas that's happening right now that's going to lead to innovation in local communities. Traveling across the country the last 3.5-4 years, helping leaders in this space, it was an education for me. And what I learned is one size doesn't fit all. But as we lean into one another and ask good questions, we're going to get clarity about what we can do to bring hope in our community.
That's good, Keith. As a digital strategist, brand strategist, Ted, you've spoken to the opportunity that we find ourselves in too. How does that pertain to Easter, do you think?
I think as I've been on the phone with so many churches, and I echo Phil's journey, where in the beginning it was, should we say anything about COVID? And then it was like, oh, once we figured that out, it was like, should we still meet? And then once we figured that out, it was like, how long will we not be meeting? And, right, it's just been this tsunami. I have felt three core themes elevate that I think are really important at Easter, because Easter is still going to be the Super Bowl, and even though it's online, it still matters. And I think for me, the three ultimate themes that I think need to hit Easter, be reflected at Easter. One is community, that we're not just about getting you great content and hoping you like it for the next 4 weeks, but we're actually about figuring out ways to be a community in a new way. And that has implications for social engagement, for what you post on social. It has implications for email. I think the second theme is culture. I think who you are as a church, right? Phil talked about authenticity. I think culture's never mattered more, right? Sometimes we think, well, we're not in physical proximity, so culture kind of doesn't matter. That's not true. It's never who you are as a church, what you value, how you communicate, the kind of people you are has never mattered more. And that has to shape not only the content and the curriculum that we pump out, but the opportunities that we create and the way that we be staff and the way that we lead and the way that we communicate. And I think culture has to be amplified over digital because we don't have the physical proximity. So if you have core values or culture values, now's the time to really hit that drum and remind your staff, remind your leaders, remind your church of who we are. Third theme, so the first theme, community, second theme, culture. Third theme is long-range thinking. And what I mean by that, we're not going to unwind the clock and just go back to church life 3 weeks ago. What we're doing today is going to have long-lasting impact, right? I suspect 15 to 25% of families will choose to continue live streaming months after we can gather. I suspect some of the churches I'm helping set up Zoom accounts for to do small groups will continue to do small groups once a week via Zoom and gather once a month for a big dinner and a big physical party, because it's easier, especially if you live in Manhattan or you live in a downtown area. So I think we have to coach our churches to think long range and not just triage, hunker down. So how that plays out at Easter is going to look unique to each person listening to this. But I think for me, community, culture, and long range thinking are the important things as a leader to be wrestling with.
That's really helpful. When you say long range thinking, I automatically go to the Super Bowl, Easter, and first time guests. And I'm going to popcorn around a bit with some questions here, reminding those people watching that we're working this out as we go. We don't have the answers. But attracting first time guests, is this the time for the church just to focus on the church? Or how do you equip your people to still invite? And what digital marketing tactics should we be using to do this? I'm going to start with Anthony.
Man, that's a great question. I want to go back real quick before I answer that to something Phil said. And I think he said something like, it's our time. This is our time, right? And I want to speak to comm leaders, tech leaders right now, because where in most churches, comm leaders and tech, the comm teams and the tech teams are really just service entities. They're there to serve the function of the church. And I think there's a shift happening where now they're finding themselves in leadership roles right now because they are leading out. Here's the best way now we can communicate. Here's the tool that we can use to strengthen our small groups and communities. And I love seeing this. I feel like this is the time for our comm leaders and tech leaders to be those leaders. And I think this will hopefully be a shift long-term, kind of what Ted was talking about, because the church isn't, communication isn't a thing the church does, it's the thing the church does. So now we need to position these guys and gals in the church to be a part of the leadership table to really talk about what's the best way to communicate. Now, to answer your question, I don't think it changes much. At least our philosophy and our strategy is, how do we create advocates, right? How do we strengthen our congregation to be billboards for Jesus in the community, right? I think that doesn't change. I think it just, the method changed. You know, now it's happening digitally, right? How are we giving people content to share on their channels? How are we still creating environments that they want to share with their neighbors, right? How are we rewarding behavior that our congregation is doing that inspires other people in our congregation to do? Like, for instance, we saw people going onto local apps like Nextdoor and posting things about, how can I serve my neighbors? Hey, neighbor, I'm here. I can go, for those of you that are vulnerable, I can go shopping for you, right? Stuff like that. Like, we're going to tell that story so that we see other people inspired to now do that in their community and find creative ways to serve their community. So I don't think it really changes. I always think it's a both and. When the body of Christ is so beautiful and it's mobilized perfectly, it's going to be so attractive that it's going to attract the community to come engage. I think this is our time to do that.
That's good. And we're going to be jumping all around here to your first response, Anthony, and the communications leader suddenly being at the big table. We've been talking, Keith and Phil and Ted, for a number of years now about the church waking up to the digital revolution, and then realizing, whoa, we're woken up now and we're behind and we need to catch up. And we started to see that happening. Suddenly the church has been woken up. And I really believe that we need to capitalize on helping the church get there. And we can come back to more resources around that. But back to the guest experience. What do you think follow-up looks like? I'm going to jump to you here, Jill. What does the first-time guest experience look like online? Have you been having conversations about that at Eastside? What does follow-up look like and engagement for guests online?
Yeah, again, we're all kind of at the baby steps, and I'm confident our assimilation director is thinking this crazy because that's how he works. But we tried last week to take our free gift, for being a guest, first time guest, and we tried to do an online thing with Amazon. And I know we didn't feel like that was a long term solution, so we're going to have to figure out maybe that even goes out the door, because again, we were counting on physical presence with the first time guest. But I'm sure there's several things with following up that we can work on. But I really like what Anthony is talking about. I was taking some notes here as we're all learning, as we are also trying to help. But I like the idea a lot of being the church out, on the street, so to speak, and through, the Nextdoor app and those kinds of things, because people will remember that. And when they are looking for a church, they're going to remember us, they're going to remember you guys and your people that were out and just being human, which is really, right now, there's a lot of people that aren't being very nice. It's really sad what's going on at the stores, especially. But I think that, again, we say this a lot, like, it used to be all marketing, like getting your name out there. And it's okay, if somebody's looking for a church, they're going to remember Eastside. They're going to remember, I saw this church called Saddleback, and I'm going to go see if they can help me. They're not going to see that so much. They're not going to see the brick and mortar or the marketing or the logo as much. At this point, I don't think that's what it's about. Again, back to what Anthony was saying, this is the kind of stuff I'm going to take to our conversation at our exec meeting coming up. Is how do we get out there? And I know the team's thinking about it, so I'm not saying we haven't been thinking about it, but it's also how to get out there and be the church without jeopardizing, like we had a bunch of campus pastors like, we're going to go start helping the elderly. No. You cannot go near them. You know what I mean? Like, but how do we find out what they need so then we can leave it on the doorstep, that kind of thing. So I don't know. It's a great question, Tim, and I think it's probably one of the hardest ones, but I definitely agree. It's less about the attraction now, and it's more about being human to people. And then when the time comes, inviting them on the online experience, or, hopefully sooner than later, inviting them, to church.
Yeah, that's good. Phil, I'm going to come to you in a minute and talk about programming and how we make Holy Week engaging and interactive. But before we do that, talking about the first-time guest experience, I want to jump to Keith and Ted and talk about chat rooms and tools that we have now that we didn't have that can make this interactive for the church and for guests. Talk about how we use those tools more effectively.
I'll take a stab at this. One of the things that I've seen, a pivot that's happened in the last week, leaders are being forced to reframe how they understand digital tools of communication. Traditionally, social media was used as a platform to promote, to tell people what was happening. All of a sudden now, because of social distancing and, stay at home, these are environments. So we have to pivot from digital channels to digital environments. People's screen time has increased dramatically over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you guys have seen your own, reports. I get that report on my phone, and mine was up 30%, last week. And so as people are on digital more, what that means is that we actually have an opportunity to create an environment. They're living in these environments for a certain amount of time. And so how churches can capitalize on that in a way to share hope is, I would say, a couple things. One, continue to create share-worthy content. So I love that about social, that it's called sharing, right? Like if you like it, you share it. Churches right now that are struggling for relevance, I would say, what are the needs? Back to what Phil was saying, what are the needs in your community, and how are you creating content that's share worthy? And give people stuff that they want to share, that's easy to share. Remove those barriers for them and free them up with the tools. Years ago, corporations were doing this for years, giving the customer the tools. They want their customers to become their sales force. Church, this is an opportunity for us to empower our leaders, our people, to become advocates by giving them share-worthy content. The other thing I would say is, if we're gonna really connect with people and not just hope that it reaches people with our, whether we share a video or we share a blog or a vlog of some sort, we need calls to action. These are invitations where people click on a link. They're invited to participate right now. And I do think that this is an opportunity to invite engagement and participation. So many times we're counting attendance weekend after weekend. What do we measure now? We need to measure engagement. And the way that we do that is everything that we're sharing, let's call people to, again, is it an opportunity to serve and to give and to participate, or is it an opportunity to share that, that video? Calls to action will help you to measure engagement. So create share-worthy content, give people calls to action, invite them to participate. But then I think also you need a very simple way of capturing their information. Now, I would say this, and I've had this conversation, Ted, I know you have too, with leaders, for years. How much information do you capture? What kind of information and data points do you need on someone? What I would say is make it easy for people right now. I think text services are really powerful tools where people were willing to give you their information. And again, I think you need a strategy behind that. But at the same time, giving people ways to give you their information, capturing that information, whether it's email, whether it's text, and then building lists with that information so that you can communicate with them on a regular basis. But so again, create share-worthy content, give people calls to action, and then capture their data, their information, so that you can begin building them as your list, as your community. Those people want to know what's going on. And I think give them an opportunity to tell you, hey, here's how you get in touch with me. And I think we're going to see more and more people offering up their information because they want to be connected during this season of isolation.
That's good. Ted, there's been churches that have mastered the online experience in a big way, like Life Church. They have resources available to help, like their chat board, Elevation. There's lots of watch parties being hosted. What are some of those tools that we can really use and leverage at this time?
Yeah, it really is a great question, and I applaud how practical and tactical this is going, because I've been a part of webinars that have just lived in the clouds, and I've got 5 hopefully practical things. I think the first thing I've been helping churches try and address is to not see digital as a department or as a landing page of COVID response, and here's our digital options. I think you, for the next 4 to 5 weeks, need to reshape your entire web content around digital. So your small groups page, address digital. Your children's ministry, address how it's happening through digital, if there is anything. But digital has to become the thing, not a thing. Second practical tip, crowdsource video. Your congregation is at home. They've never had more time. They're worshiping as a family. They're eating meals together. They're doing things that are easy to capture via pictures or video on their phone. You should be asking your congregation to shoot things to you, whether it's through Dropbox, Google Drive, DMing on Insta, whatever channel you want to set up. Capture stuff from your congregation. And if you have the capacity or volunteer capacity, do a weekly montage. Hey, family, this is our church in a new way, and do a 5-minute overview of just pictures, little video clips, things, background music, whatever it is. You can make an unbelievably community building piece of material weekly that is generated just from content your community send you. Now's the time to be doing that. Third thing, old school, phone calls. Pick up the phone, set up a phone bank. Call everybody in your church over the next 3 weeks somehow. Start with the older generation who might be the most freaked out. And I would say maybe the fourth thing that follows up on that is some churches I've worked with have used their small group leaders and or their boards and or their staff to create a web that has every zip code of their church covered. I would figure out a way to mobilize a team or an army that represent their region, and you communicate to everybody regionally, hey, if you need anything, prayer, whatever, here's how you get in touch with practical people to get practical needs met. Your phone call strategy could even echo that type of web via zip code distribution. And the last thing really is I think churches should be doing live chats and webinars. People are going to grow in anxiety, grow in questions. There's going to be big theological things they're wrestling with. And I think a great step for new people, hey, welcome to our church. If you're new and you want to learn more, we're hosting 3 webinars over the next week to learn more. Join us, right? And it's the pastor. There's any number of ways to do it, but you could do Next Steps or Who We Are or, Westbridge 101 via a webinar and have it scheduled 3 times over the week following Easter. That's all I got.
Good, Ted. Anthony.
Yeah, so I'm going to go down this theme that Ted, because he's brilliant, this practical theme. I have 3 things I think churches need to be wrestling on regarding this follow-up conversation. I think they got to address 3 things: system, structure, and strategy. What are the systems that we're using to communicate both proactively and reactively, right? What are the systems? And then what's the structure? What's the infrastructure? What are the ministry model that we need to have in place to handle the load? And then what is our strategy of a proactive communication and a reactive communication? I think we got to answer those 3 things. So for us, we send out proactively every single day an email to about 180,000 people. And I know that this is more challenging depending on the size of your church. But for us, we send out proactively this proactive communication every single day to about 180,000. We know we have about 40,000 active members in our church. How do we make a big church feel small? How do we communicate or have a personal touch on all 40,000? Well, we have to have a proactive strategy to, okay, there's no way we can call everybody, but what we can do is set up a strategy to call all of our, what we call community leaders, which is a team that has, I want to say about 12 small group hosts under them, so that we can equip them to contact their 12 the small group hosts. Now the small group host communicates to their small group. So right there, that's a good chunk of our 40,000 members through that proactive approach. We also have a care callers that's calling, actively calling our most vulnerable, so 65 and above members of our church. So that's proactive. So we have a lot of proactivity going out. We actually have a team calling our singles. I think our singles gets missed in all of this. Our singles are hurting right now. They're home alone right now, right? Families, I could at least hang out with my wife and kids. They're by themselves right now. So how are we reaching out to them, right? So you have this proactive strategy that's calling and reaching out. And then you have the reactive, like we have established 3 public phone lines that people can call for emotional help, care and support, our CR line, because our CR ministry is very strong and active, and then just general questions. So we have a team of volunteers that are practicing social distancing in our offices. They got their own office or cubes that are at least, they went over, I think, 10 feet between each cube, to be basically a call center for people to call in. So again, I think you have to what works for you. What is the system you're using to handle the load that you have? What's your structure, your ministry structure to handle the emotional and physical needs of your church? And what's the strategy that you're proactively reacting to the needs of your church?
Really helpful, Anthony. It's interesting you bring up the people who are single. We talk about those who are high risk health-wise. We don't talk enough about those that are high risk emotionally. And it's single people that have no interaction right now. And that's really important. Great things for us to remember. Let's pivot to you, Phil. And I know you've got a whole book of ideas and thoughts on communications and digital strategies. But as a programmer too, how Jill talked about familiar people on screen, that kind of thing, as we do these digital worship gatherings. How do we make Holy Week engaging and interactive? What conversations and thoughts are you having?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're rethinking communication. We're definitely needing to rethink programming as well. What's been on my heart is we're so overwhelmed as church leaders right now that it's really easy to just think about us and just focusing on surviving this, that we sometimes forget about the person that's sitting on the other side of the phone or the other side of the computer and advocating for that person. So for everybody that's programming for their church right now for Easter, what I would just encourage you to do is be an advocate for that person. And it should feel way more like you're talking. Hopefully you can advocate for that person like you're sitting down and having coffee with them. It should feel much more like that than you're giving a speech to 200 people. And the opportunity that we have for programming right now is our engagement should skyrocket. It should go through the roof, because when you can line up and parallel your engagement and your programming with how you're going to engage people through live chat and through engaging people through your digital next steps, you have opportunities like never before. So for example, this past week, we just invited people at the beginning of the service to just, hey, take a moment and share with us your prayer request here, or shoot us a private message. And I think it was within like 3 or 4 minutes, we had over 50 prayer requests come in right away from people in need. But that is way more people than we typically have after our first service when we invite people to come up to talk with our prayer team. So what I would encourage everybody to do is line up what you're talking about with your digital experience and how you're engaging people with your live chat or with your next steps digitally. So what that means is your engagement's going to look different for how you're going to invite people to engage in worship than it did 3 weeks ago. They may not be singing, but your encouragement may be, hey, you may want to be singing as a family. You may just want to be taking a moment and reflect on these words and just let this encourage you right now. Give people permission to do what you'd invite them to do right now, because they may not know what to do. For the teaching, you may want to set them up to say, hey, I want to invite you to just take a moment and pause and breathe and like it, just walk people through the next steps that you think they need to do to be able to get the most out of this digital experience. The interesting thing about digital is if people don't pay attention, they're just going to turn you off. If they're attending your services, they may be in front of you, but this doesn't mean they're paying attention. So you have to earn their attention every step of the way. And so I would just encourage you along the way, just advocate for their attention, advocate for helping people take next steps every step of the way, and just make that parallel experience between your digital experience and your content, really make that really, really cohesive, because I think what you'll see is more engagement than ever before.
It's interesting. I've been hearing so many different things and ideas this week. It'll be great to hear how many more surface as we lead up to Easter. I've heard about preaching pastors interacting with the band on stage at the end of their message and asking them questions, and them hearing in the chat room, I've never heard the drummer speak before. Well, sometimes we don't want to hear the drummer speak. But anyway, just interesting things like that. The need to have shorter experiences because engagement is different on screen, to work out what songs do and don't work in that kind of environment to engage somebody in their living room. Even heard some churches talking about drive-in church as a potential possibility for Easter, and things could really, really change, and we may not be able to do that. We may be, who knows? But I'm looking forward to hearing way more great ideas leading up to Easter in just 3 weeks' time. As we wind this down, I want to go around and just chat to you guys about practical resources. There's so many things that we can tap into right now, especially churches that don't have teams to draw on or are trying to work out how to make this happen. I'm going to start with you, Keith. Chat a little bit about what we've got going on and what you're seeing.
Yeah, so our team produced a handful of resources this week. The first one that I put out was just in relation to what's the immediate thing that churches need to do. It was crazy that even after 5 days, that some of that stuff just felt like yesterday's news. So it's constantly evolving. We put out a 2.0 on that. And I would say that that's probably a resource that's there to help churches of a certain size, or maybe with certain limitations that don't have all the resources and the teams. I mean, I look around this room and I'm just so impressed, with the leaders that are here and how God's using each of you. At the same time, there are so many churches that were unprepared, ill-equipped, and not ready for this change, and they're doing great work in their community. So we wanted to respond to that. The second one was just a resource to help churches and their teams, their staff, because Slingshot Group for the last 13 years, we've been able to serve the church as a remote, virtual organization. So we've learned some things through that process. I've personally learned some things about my own mental, emotional health and what work life looks like in a virtual environment. And so we put some practical resources together called Virtual Church Teams. Just here's how you pivot. Here's how you can help your team stay connected. But then the last thing, and I want to point outward for this one, and that is we had an opportunity to be on with Ed Stetzer on a podcast earlier this week. He's been interviewing a lot of church leaders as they navigate through this. And so coronavirusinthechurch.com, it also has resources with Pastor Rick Warren and Purpose Driven. It's an incredible hub, coronavirusinthechurch.com. If you're looking for practical resources, I'd encourage you to go there. It's really just so practical for churches that are going online, but then it's also helpful in terms of community resources and where to look for those. And so they've done a great job curating that site.
Thanks, Keith. Ted, resources helpful that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think as an agency, we're doing a ton of coaching, both pro bono and as an existing relationship with our clients. But one of the things we're seeing is as you've all stated, communications is now becoming a critical conversation, and most churches have an emaciated staff. So if there's help that you need, we're offering all sorts of bundled hour discounts to help churches do what they need to do in this season and not spend a lot of money doing it. So I think just practically speaking, if we can help you, ping me. Even if it's just a phone call, I'll talk to you for half an hour for free, just to help you in this season. A couple of other practical things. I think social media has never mattered more right now, and how we post, the frequency of our posts, posting in ways that draw out our congregation into community, into engagement, than having our staff and our leaders re-engage. And that means you have to have content, and it's tough to get pictures right now. So stock photos become helpful, but stock photos can be a real problem because of authenticity, as Phil talked about. SundaySocial.tv is a fantastic resource, low cost, monthly. I love the guys that started it. I believe in it. If you need helpful photos that don't look weird or inauthentic, you can probably find some there. And the last thing I'd say is, if you have a Twitter account as a church, most of the time it's pretty atrophied. This is a great opportunity for your senior pastor to be sharing things, quotes, theology, things they're reading. Get them on Twitter. If it's never been easier, and redirect your church's Twitter account to your senior pastors. Far better to do that than have your Twitter account reflect, last post 4 months ago. Either be off Twitter or be on it well. I find being on it well to have it pivot to being your senior pastor's voice on behalf of the church. That's all I got.
It's good. Thanks, Ted. Let's go to you, Anthony. I know that Saddleback and Purpose Driven is already doing a lot to resource. What would you point people to?
Well, Keith mentioned one of them. Our partnership with Ed Stetzer has been great, so there's some resources there. But if you really, as a church, want to know how to best serve your community, the needs of your community, thepeaceplan.com, we've been putting resources up there. It points back to a lot of our resources with Ed Stetzer, but that kind of shows you how you can respond to the needs of your community and do it in a way that is honoring God and really lifting up the local church. I think it's important right now, as we've been saying, that the church, it's opportunity to be the hero right now, and to lift up the church and reestablish its image in our community. So that's a really good resource for our churches to be present and active in the community. And last, I would say, and not resource, but almost a final thought, is just helping our congregation being present at home. We are home all day with our kids and our families. So right now, don't give people things to do. Give people, empower people to be a father, be a parent, be a dad, be a mom, be a sibling, be a friend. Call your friend that you haven't talked to in a long time.
And also for leaders who are so practically driven by their work, he said, look, during this enforced isolation, work on yourself and come back a healthier person. That's what he was saying to his staff. That's right. Jill, what about you and resources?
Yeah, well, there's a ton out there, and it would be hard probably to narrow it down, but I would just go back to everybody focusing on the Great Commission and what each of their churches is about. What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? And then go after the resources that best fit, a church's vision, especially their new vision, or at least adjusted, I should say. But what I'm hearing all the guys talking about is, with the whole digital environment, I think that's so new. We all throw those words around, and our egos get in the way. Nobody wants to admit they don't really know what it means. So I would say find resources like that could really help each church understand what they're even trying to achieve in the first place. Of course, like Life Church has been giving out their stuff forever, but with their open network, again, all these churches who are just back in a corner going, I don't even know where to start. I don't have a streaming service. I don't even know what equipment to get. I don't have Twitter. I mean, that kind of thing. I think they should lean on the resources that are out there, and of course make them, their own to some degree. But that was that, and I just think people really have to sort through and not be bombarded and overwhelmed by what all is out there. I say too, it might be good. I know a lot of pastors are doing this. They're trying to kind of find their tribe. They've got group texts going on, and they're doing their own Zoom calls and trying to encourage each other. And those first 2 days when this just all really started hitting the U.S., I know that immediately the phones were out, and there was 50 pastors at one time on Jean's phone. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? But thing that gives support, and just helping everybody kind of. I mean, every time you guys say something that resonates with me, it's like, okay, I'm not as dumb as I think I am, or whatever. But it's really, I'm sure, overwhelming for the majority of pastors out there right now. And I know in Florida, a church has offered for other churches to come and use their studio and open up the doors and say, I know you don't have what you need to do this, so come here and use our facility. They're not in lockdown yet, so I guess they can do that. But or at least I'm not sure they are. And then I know that a church in Florida also did a drive theater as well, which I think is super clever. And I would have loved to jump on that idea. But I don't think we'll be doing that at this point. Mm. That's about all I got.
That's good, Jill. And you're smart. Trust me.
Tim, I do think Jill raises a great point. I think there are churches that have amazing resource and capacity and knowledge that much smaller churches around them need. And to figure out how to be that resource church in this time, even if you're shut down, is really important. Now, how you do that's a different question. We don't have time for, but I do think this is an opportunity for churches that have resource and talent and capacity to serve other churches.
Mm-hmm. And, even though we're all feeling maxed right now and struggling with boundaries, we are all willing to share our thoughts, our wisdom, or any wisdom that we can share. I know, Ted, you said you'd be willing to get on the phone at Slingshot. We're getting on the phone all day, every day, and we're willing to have as many conversations as you need to help you. Anthony, I know you're a huge resource. So please reach out. Don't do this on your own. We could go on and talk for another couple of hours, but you may have already tuned out. We just love having this conversation and hopefully giving you a sense of team. And if you're not already thinking about Easter, you probably saw the banner on this Zoom, and now you're thinking about Easter. I know I'm getting called into a planning meeting at my home church this week about Easter. I know lots of people are having these. So we're going to leave you with it. But before we do that, Keith, would you pray over these churches prepping for this conversation?
Yeah, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you humbly because, God, we are truly in a season where we need your help now more than ever. God, we thank you that you saw this coming even though we didn't. And because of your sovereignty, God, we can trust your hand at work even when we can't see it. And Lord, we pray right now over the church globally that you would continue to breathe life in and through your church to our communities. Lord, this is a time in our world where there's so much upheaval and it's tumultuous, God. And we pray for your peace that passes all understanding, Lord, to just echo out through digital platforms and channels of communication in the days and weeks ahead. We pray that the ears and the hearts of our world would be attuned to the gospel like never before. Lord, as this crisis has struck, it has put us in leadership through the crucible. And Lord, I pray that as you continue to refine us through these challenges, God, I pray that we would become innovative, that you would give us ideas and spark inspiration. And Lord, when we feel as though we're falling flat and we have nothing to offer, I pray that you would affirm in each leader's heart the calling that you have placed on us. And Lord, in the days ahead, would you release leaders in the church to be digital shepherds in these environments where people are hanging out in the midst of isolation where people feel separated. Lord, I pray that we would use technology in a way that we could draw close to people, that they would feel your love through our words, through the things that we share. Lord, also unleash an army of digital missionaries who will be equipped to go and to share your good news with a world in need right now. God, I thank you for this conversation, and I pray it would go to every place that it needs to go, and that leaders, as they hear it, that they would be encouraged, inspired, and called to act. God, we thank you that you are building your church, and that even the gates of hell itself cannot prevail against it. God, we stand and we trust that that is true, and we know it is. God, we thank you for this calling. We ask for your help in Jesus' name. Amen.